And we get down the block, and all I hear is 1013, 1013, 1013, the address of the precinct. It's the highest call you could have. I really realized how much pressure is on us, how much pressure to perform.
Welcome back to Internal Affairs, a police podcast here with the IA guy, another heavy hitter from the wonderful state of New York. NYPD is in the house, man. We're Code 6 with NYPD. Look, we're going to be talking to John D. Macari, who was he was a lieutenant with the New York Police Department. He's got quite a story. What I can tell you is part of his IA story here in the city of Los Angeles when you didn't want to get the jab, when this big mandate happened, this illness, if you will, back in 2020, people who didn't want to go along with the program in terms of the testing, so on and so forth, was considered to be an internal affairs complaint investigation. So it was considered to be misconduct. However, in talking to John, for whatever reason in the state of New York, it wasn't necessarily an IA. But we're going to be having a talk about that with John, so stay tuned, and we'll get him on. Okay, Code 6, at scene with John D. Hey, man, what's going on, bro?
Yo, what's up, brother? It's a pleasure to be on here, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what, Eric, your partner in your your co-host in your podcast, I've had a pleasure to meet. He's come in here and told his story, and of course, man, I told myself I got to get John D in here so we can talk about your story. What do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely, dude. Eric's a great guy. I watched both of those interviews. I thought they were great, and we appreciate the connection, the East Coast, West Coast connection. So I think it's important because there's a lot of crossover, a lot of similarities to what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Like I always say, there will never be enough platforms for us to get our word out. And so I truly appreciate what you guys are doing. And that's one of several reasons why I decided to start this podcast with the label and the title of Internal Affairs, because you and I can agree it's just a topic that's not discussed enough. It's a bit taboo. What do you think?
100%. I think a lot of guys that worked internal affairs would stray away from actually even having the conversation. A lot of people shy away from the fact that even if they did any time in internal affairs, or hone in on that part of their career at all. And then, nobody really wants to talk about any of the stuff that happened during their career where they may have been involved in. But I think it's necessary because we hear a lot about how the internal pressures of policing really weigh a lot on the exodus of policing. So, and I believe internal affairs is one of those factors.
Very true. Segue into, look, you came on the job in 2004. That was about 20 years ago. I got to ask you, what was your impression of internal affairs, if any, when you came on the job? Because for whatever reason, it seems to be this negative stigma that's been in existence for decades. And so I ask all my guests, hey, man, when you came on the job, what's the impression they got of IA, or what did they tell you, if anything, about internal affairs?
Yeah, so I think we had like a brief introduction. We had somebody come from internal affairs, come down and speak. Person they picked really wasn't a great representation for the Internal Affairs Bureau. So I think a lot of what I felt coming in and from the academy, I had a negative light on internal affairs because it was more of a scare tactic. Oh, we're always watching you. We have undercovers everywhere. We're gonna, if you take a free cup of coffee, that leads you down the road to corruption. And we actually had the chief of internal affairs give us that exact speech that he was talking about the most corrupt cop in the NYPD history, who some consider, it's contestable, but Michael Dowd, if anybody has ever watched anything on him. And the chief of internal affairs at the time stated that Michael Dowd, all of his corruption stemmed from his first free cup of coffee. So as a young kid and as someone growing up in New York City, I thought it was nonsense, and I thought it was a lot of fear tactics. So I had the stigma in my head, a bad stigma of internal affairs.
Yeah, all because of a cup of coffee. Interesting you say that. I was just in Starbucks the other day in line, and there was a black and white LAPD vehicle behind me, and I told the cashier, hey, you know what? Whatever they're ordering, I'll pay for it. I mean, come on, that's the very least that we can do. I mean, they're out there. I mean, I don't know about you, but it's like 98 degrees, almost 100 degrees out here where I live. And I remember, man, when I was pushing the sled, is what we call it, out in the streets, man, the hot sunny day, you can appreciate the community, you know, being there for you. And, you know, I just applaud for people who are doing the job today compared to what it was 20 years ago for you, and certainly 25 years ago for me. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, it's the policing's evolved so much, you know, even from, you know, my brother-in-law got on in the early 90s, like late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
And I feel like we had some overlap in our careers, but our careers were significantly different. And the departments, although it was the same department, the NYPD, we wore the same patch, we wore the same uniform, we did a lot of the same details, anti-crime, plainclothes work. There was, you know, it's completely different. His stories are going to be different than my stories. You know, it's just policing's changing. It's continuously changing. It's always evolving. And, you know, I do think at this point, this is the most scrutiny. I think we're at peak scrutiny. I can't see it getting any more scrutinizing.
And in addition to that, they ask so much from us. I really honestly believe that. The job of a police officer today is not only under that scope, like you said, major scrutiny, but man, there's a high demand, a lot of duties and responsibilities, don't you think?
I think that Jesus Christ would have a hard time doing this job at this point. I really do. I think we're expected to be absolutely perfect. We're expected to be psychologists. We're expected to be, the marksmen. We're expected to be tactical geniuses. We're expected to be martial artists where we can hit people and never hurt them. We're expected to talk people out of situations that doctors can't save them from.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, and then the amount of expectancy on us is really, it's not possible. It's not. And I continuously say this. And when I talk about policing, I really always talk about the NYPD because I don't know anywhere else. I don't know what it was like in LA. I don't know what it was like in the Midwest, but I really feel like at this point, I don't know what the clear path to be a successful, competent police officer is because there is so much scrutiny. And really at this point, the procedure just kind of doesn't, it's kind of making everything convoluted. And I think we're honing too much and we're expecting too much of people who are human. I think that gets lost.
Yeah, and if I may add into all that is that we sit here and claim and cheerlead for this thin blue line, right? We're like one big happy family. We're all family and we're all going to support each other. And yet when you fall, because we're supposed to be so perfect, I don't know. I tend to question that unity. That unity doesn't really exist, especially when it comes to an IA, which is, I suppose, one of several reasons why I decided to do this podcast is because would you agree that the way we're treated through this whole process is actually the punishment itself?
I mean, I think, you see right away that the way the administrations have handled policing and law enforcement and the scrutiny that we're under, it really becomes an individualized job. It's almost pushing the average police officer to not feel part of a team, to look solely out for themselves.
Yeah. Totally.
And that's kind of what's going on is like, there is no thin blue line. There is no blue family, in my opinion. You will find people that you will connect with and stay with. But yeah, you're the subject of an internal affairs investigation, whether you did something wrong or not.
Yeah.
People are straying away from you. The supervisors that loved you don't love you anymore. The subordinates that loved you don't love you anymore. Yeah. Your partner's questioning you. It's the nature of policing and the nature of the scrutiny at this point where it's becoming a very, it's almost every man for himself at this point.
Yeah, no, totally. You're in the island all alone when you are facing an IA, and those darkest moments, not many people tend to pay attention to or be there for you, which goes to my point. We claim we're this one big blue family, and you know what? I tend to I call bullshit sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. Hey, if you're in a room full of sergeants that are beginning their internal affairs assignment as an investigator, what's the one thing you want them to know about the job?
I want them to know in depth whatever they're investigating. I've seen a lot of, I was in internal affairs for 2 years and 8 months. And I saw a lot of people investigating cases that they had no business investigating because they didn't have the integral knowledge of what exactly they were investigating. And for instance, if they were investigating an anti-crime team who were accused of doing an improper search, the investigator really, I found oftentimes the investigator wasn't too familiar with what the NYPD procedure and even some of the criminal procedure law in New York allowed police officers to do and not do. And so myself have doing anti-crime as well, what I would want is I would want someone, if they're investigating a use of force on me, I would want them to know everything they need to know about use of force. If they're investigating an improper search, I want them to know exactly what exactly is an improper search and what's a proper search. And I want them to know that because I want them to have experienced it.
Are you speaking from past experiences where you've had IA investigators that weren't really that knowledgeable?
It's exactly what I'm speaking on. I was a sergeant in internal affairs for 2 years and 8 months, and I literally saw people getting hit with allegations from the investigators, not from complainants on the street, that were improper. And they were improper because the investigator was not fully aware of NYPD procedure and criminal procedure law. Like, they were not aware of it themselves. And I had to literally have debates several times about what a proper search is, about what we're allowed to do, what's not a proper search.
Yeah.
And I've had to actually pull out the guide, and I have to pull out our patrol guide, our NYPD patrol guide, and pull out the law and read it to them in a room full of, by the way, people way above my rank.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, though. Whose fault is that for not preparing for a job like that? What do you think? Who do we hold accountable?
I'm always going to go back to the leadership. I mean, you should know when someone's capable of investigating another individual, when someone's a competent enough police officer. So I blame on the leadership a lot, because I think that the most important investigations as it concerning for your career will be the ones that come down from internal affairs on you. And so what the administration should be doing is ensuring that we have the best of the best, the most competent investigators who actually want to be there and who actually want to seek the truth wherever that leads.
Yeah. And most of the time, they are not prepared for such an assignment. We can agree to that. Hey, listen, trip down memory lane. I get to know you a little bit. I do know you're, of course, we talked about hosting that podcast, but you came on the job in 2004. Man, you, let's see, you moved up the ranks. Maybe you can help me out here. You went from a police officer, then you made sergeant. When did you make sergeant?
I made sergeant in 12. I spent some time as a police officer. I really loved being a cop. I did, as a rookie, I was Operation Impact. So I did that. That was basically, we're in high crime neighborhoods, learning how to arrest people, learning how to write summonses. We were there to deter shootings, deter people from carrying guns, drug dealing, things of that nature, high profile street crimes. So I went from that to doing midnight patrol for a short time, right into plainclothes anti-crime work, where I loved. I was actually the most fun part of my career. And then I went from there to being the field intelligence officer in my precinct to being promoted to sergeant in 2012.
Right. And then let's see, I have it here. You did make 2012. So then you did that for 8 years, and then you got promoted to lieutenant in April of 2020.
Yeah, I spent some time as a sergeant. I went to patrol for a little bit, right back to uniform, to doing like 4x12 patrol, like overnight. I always worked nights the majority of my career. The most amount of time I spent was like 6 at night to 2 in the morning. That was like the overwhelming majority part of my career, both as a sergeant and a cop. And then I went to being the condition sergeant, and then again back into plainclothes, anti-crime work sergeant. And then I ended up in internal affairs for 2 years, 8 months. From there, it's a hard road to get out of there. I was actually well liked. I was not an investigator in
Uh-huh.
there. I worked more on the administrative end, where I oversaw the influx of cases coming in. I actually liaised on with the Civilian Complaint Review Board that actually, so there's only one guy in the
Oh,
NYPD that liaisons with the Civilian Complaint Review Board, and it was me. So it's hysterical that me and Eric hooked up years later. We were rookies and did work together, but him being the cop with the most amount of civilian complaints. So we have a very rounded, well-rounded
yes, you
knowledge
do.
of
Yeah.
complaint.
I was going to say you guys are a perfect fit for such a podcast, and I thank you for that. And it's entertaining. I really, really do enjoy it. Hey, man, let me ask you this though: what's the one job that you wish you had or tried out for?
The one job I think I would have liked to do emergency services. I
Okay.
really got caught up in anti-crime and I loved it. And that's exactly what I wanted to do when I became a rookie. Like when I came out, I was like, wow, I want to do that.
Right.
And I got the chance not only to do that as a cop, but I got the chance to do it as a supervisor. And those were the best times of my career. But I did want to be in emergency services as
Yeah.
well. And I never pursued it. And
Yeah.
it's something I could have definitely did. I just never pursued it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's fair enough, man. Look, well, look, let's talk about this controversy that did happen throughout the United States. Obviously, we can all agree that in 2020, we all experienced this major illness that required for the government. We can put it, in a very general umbrella. Decided to mandate for all of us first responders to get the jab. And I can tell you, I was there in LAPD when this all went down, and we had a guest here who talked about the situation that she was in, and unfortunately, she was disciplined for it. And I know, in you and I talking about this, it wasn't necessarily an IA, but obviously there was some disciplinary issues that you were facing with this, to the point where I suppose almost caused you to pull the pin or something along those lines, where pretty much you just said, you know what, I'm pretty much done with this place. So kind of I'll leave the floor up to you, man. Tell me what happened back in 2020.
Yeah, so 2020, I work throughout the whole pandemic. I'm
Hmm.
out there. George Floyd hits, the George Floyd incident hits. I'm out there. That time I was administrative. I was administrative lieutenant. I was the integrity control officer, so I wasn't
Uh-huh.
too much on the street. But when George Floyd hit, I was actually out on the street. I was the first person to volunteer when they said suit up. I suited up. I put my uniform on. I went right out, and we worked throughout about a year and a half throughout that whole pandemic. No issue, no
Right.
issue. I mean, some of us were getting sick and things of that nature, but we went back to work. We were lining up in an auditorium, about 2,000 of us every day, going out on the streets of New York City and being the police.
Hmm.
And I was blessed. I was like, I felt, I would pray every day. I would get in my car and I would thank God. I'm listening to my friends whose businesses are shut down, my friends who work for other businesses, they can't go to work. And I'm like, wow, I'm like, thank God I have the job I have.
Right.
I'm able to go
Right.
out there. And I always felt blessed, whatever happened, natural disaster, riots. I always felt humbled that I was the guy that get to go out there and do that. So I did that. So a year and a half comes in. We weren't wearing masks. We weren't doing any of that. And then next thing I know, mayor puts an edict into place that we all have to follow, of mask wearing and testing, followed, which I spoke out against because I do feel that it violates equal opportunity law,
Right.
and violates New York State human rights law, and it violates our First Amendment, and identifies me, actually goes past my HIPAA law. So I spoke out about that, and that really put me at odds with the job that I was in love with. And, I was always 5.0 rated. I've been involved in hundreds of arrests, actually thousands of arrests. I've made hundreds to my own name. I've been involved in thousands and thousands upon emergency incidents, and yet I've never been the subject of disciplinary action. I've been the subject of numerous investigations, but never disciplinary action, nor was I ever found guilty on anything I was ever accused of, either by the job or a civilian. So 5.0 rated. I was always the guy that everybody went to for everything. To next thing I know, I was being told that if I did not comply within 7 days, I would be terminated non-disciplinary.
Wow.
And I never heard that in my life.
Okay, so here you are. Talk to me. What happened in those 7 days?
So, I knew the months leading up that something was coming because I just kept hearing the chatter. I had been
Mhm.
speaking out at some union meetings about it, and they were kind of like, "Hey, it is what it is, and we're not going to do nothing about it." And this is wrong, man. It's just, and being a supervisor, I was in a pretty unique position where I was in charge of hundreds of people.
Uh huh.
And I literally had women lined up day after day coming in my office crying, saying, "Lou," that's what they were calling me because I
Uh
was a
huh.
lieutenant. "Lou, I don't want to put this in my body, but I don't know what to do. I'm a single mother. I need health care. It's the only job I got. I don't know what I could do. I have to feed my family." And honestly, it was heartbreaking. I was like, "Well, listen, I'm not sitting here telling you what to do." And I,
Right.
I, I came to the point where I was like, I wrestled with God for nights, man. I wrestled with God for months, thinking about what would happen if it came down.
Yeah.
And I wanted to stay in my career. I did. So it was really hard for me, especially the fact that I would be leaving a career where I'm making $200,000, over $200,000 a year, health benefits for my family, and I had done everything right. I had done everything right in my career. I was going to have a ginormous pension. I was still moving up the ranks. I was going to be a captain. I had done everything right. To next thing I know, I'm being told a year and a half after the pandemic, after I worked throughout the whole thing and the city's back open and everything's back open, that you have 7 days to do something and sign a waiver saying that I agree and this is great and I want to do all these things for something that I had natural provable antibodies for, and something that the police department
Yeah.
told me, because I wasn't infected with the virus itself, and because I had very bad pneumonia and I almost went out of the picture, which is something that people aren't really aware of. The NYPD had told me, the medical staff in the NYPD had told me, we don't recommend you taking this because we see that people who take this, who take anything, any type of, if they have a sickness, they don't take any type of medicine for it because they would have a adverse reaction because
Yeah.
you would have a high immune response. So with all that in my head, like I said, I wrestled with God, and the answer really was that I can't take it. I wanted to, because I wanted to stay
Yeah.
in my career, but I couldn't violate my conscience and I couldn't violate my beliefs. And so I walked away from my career, 2 years early, 18, it was a shock, dude. It was a real smack in the face.
Is if you don't mind me asking, is there having the chance to reflect on it now about what happened? Is there anything you would have done different?
I would have got my ducks in a row better legally. I
Hmm.
would have known what could have done legally, but at the time, really nobody wanted to talk about it. I mean, it was like, it was taboo to even discuss. So I couldn't
Wow.
find any attorneys to guide me properly on what actually to do. So other than that, though, there's absolutely nothing that I would do differently, because again, I was like I said, I wanted to take it to stay in my career, but I couldn't. I just couldn't. And it cost me a lot, man. It cost me a lot of friendships. It cost me a lot of family. It cost me my career. It cost me the job I love. It cost me living in the city I love. It cost me all the plans I had for my children and my own life.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't regret it at all. No, I would just so
Yeah. No.
at the end of the day, there really isn't anything that I would do differently.
No. Totally. And I know that part of this was part of this process was the fact that there is some exemptions, right? Medical and religious exemptions.
Yeah, so I could submit a religious exemption, which I did, and I never cited anything that the majority of people cited. I just said that I can't do this because you're asking me to violate my conscience, and I can't in goodwill violate my conscience. And Jesus in the Bible said twice, those are who sick are in need of a doctor, and those are who not do not. And I take that at face value, and I take it behind the scenes too to mean a lot of other different things. But at face value, that's telling me I don't need to take something when I'm not sick for it.
Right.
And I do believe God healed me, and I do believe He gave me antibodies, and I'm here today because of Him. And He guided me every step in my career,
Yeah.
all the way up into adulthood. And so I submitted that, and it was immediately denied. It was I wrote the letter. I sat up a few nights, tears in my eyes, and I'm not someone that gets too emotional,
Uh-huh.
but and it was like it was really demeaning, man. It was really
Yeah.
demeaning to, we're sitting here talking about ID investigations. How could somebody investigate my fate? How could someone tell what's the inner workings of my brain and my heart? And to sit there and hear a lot of people tell me, you're not religious. And I'm like, oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm not religious, and by the way, this is sidebar conversations because I never actually had a formal interview with the NYPD at
Yeah.
all.
I would imagine so. Which surprises me that it's non-disciplinary. At it, the issue in it itself. Uh, you know, of course, different agencies handle it different. Let me ask you this though, in terms of the legal proceedings. Well, before I even ask that question, I take it you weren't the only one that applied for this exemption. Was there others as well, or?
There were others who applied for the exemption. I was the first person in the NYPD that was denied. And I
Okay.
do believe that was because I spoke out about the mask wearing and testing.
Uh huh.
So I believe, I'm not have no proof, but I believe my union did me a favor by presenting my name to the upper echelon of the NYPD to push me down right away, because I did know a lot of people in the NYPD, and I did have a big voice. And obviously, I still have a pretty big voice,
Yeah.
even though I've been retired for over 2.5 years. So I was the first guy to be put on and really put my feet to the fire to make the decision. And I think that they did that thinking that I was going to back down and everybody
Yeah.
else would fall in line, but I didn't. And then there were actually 16,000 people that submitted exemptions.
Wow. Okay.
And arbitrarily, some people were accepted and some people weren't.
Got it.
And I've had ordained ministers who were denied. I've had ordained deacons who were denied.
Wow.
And then I've had people, entire detective squads, the boss and all the detectives filled out the same exact exemption. The only difference was their name and their tax and their shield number on it. Some of them got approved and some of them didn't.
Ah, wow. Wow. And before we wrap up this particular topic, in terms of legal proceedings, is there anything that come out of this, or is there stuff that's still pending? I mean, 16,000, I would imagine someone just didn't feel right, especially the ones that got denied.
It,
Anything that's
yeah,
going on with that, or any
there's legal
solutions?
proceedings all over. There's actually bills to get people back to work.
Okay.
That we're still working on. But every stage of the way, all of this stuff is coming out to be exactly what a lot of us said it was, that it was illegal and it was unconstitutional and it violated your religious freedom and your civil liberties and the First Amendment. And so there are been major victories, but with those major victories becomes the New York City's ability to appeal all of these cases. And so they're using all their time and all their resources, and they're actually spending more money litigating the cases to keep people out of work
Yeah.
than they would if they just reinstated and put
Yeah.
everybody with back pay.
Yeah.
They're spending more money each month to do that. If they just took the 1 month and just said, all right, you guys can go back to work,
Yeah.
all of it would be gone. But instead, they're wasting New York City taxpayer money
Wow.
to keep people out of work at a time when they need cops, they need firefighters,
Yes.
they need teachers, and they're still fighting this case. So it's we'll see.
Yeah.
The fight goes on.
Yeah, that's a damn shame on the on the part of the state. So yeah, the government. You know what? There's accountability, and this is a clean without a doubt case where the finger pointing is at the government, in my opinion. And so, like you said, if we do something about it, chances are you'll be saving a lot of taxpayers' money. But but oh well, that's just it. Anything else you'd like to add on to that? Because I got to ask you about something else that just popped in my mind while we were talking.
No, I mean that's it. That about sums it up, dude. It was wrong. It was a big, to me, it was the ultimate litmus test. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, I think the people that held on in integrity really were
yeah,
were the most heavily affected. I have no problem with anyone that made an opposite decision than
yeah,
me. That's your right as an American, and we're all given free will for a reason. So it's your right before God. Do what you want to do.
yeah. Totally,
But
I get that.
but like people that were backed in the wall, we've had people that literally submitted forged documents saying they took something that they didn't, lied in interviews, and they're still working today. And the people that said, I'm not going to take this and I can't take it because it violates my religion, or I can't take it for whatever the various reasons are, the myriad of reasons, they've been really, we've been the most heavily affected, and we've
Yeah,
really been victimized by the whole thing,
no,
where
totally.
you see that, and especially in a profession like policing, where you're going to allow people that lied, um and lied in internal affairs interviews and submitted false official documents. I mean, you're going to reward them and allow them to stay in their careers when you're pushing people who really, when their feet were put to the fire, they
Yeah.
showed you exactly what integrity looks like. So
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, truly genuine about your religious beliefs and your medical exemption. So, hey, man, you know what? I truly believe, faith has it that you're here. We're having this conversation. You got this awesome podcast, which is a segue to what I wanted to ask you. When I talked to Eric, because your podcast is so popular in terms of internal affairs, did you ever think that you were going to actually file a complaint against your own department because what's going on with your actually podcast? Talk to me a little bit about that.
I mean, it's crazy because when I retired, I started speaking out. I was on Fox News the next day. I was quoted in the paper a few times. And then I kept getting calls from media, mainstream media. And I still do till today, by the way. I
Hmm.
was quoted in the New York Post last week, 2 days ago. I was quoted in the City a couple days before that, Daily News. I started speaking out about what I saw in policing, all the things I could never talk about, like the
Right.
progressive twinge on New York City, and I honed it in on New York City and decarceral district attorneys and progressive DAs and the city council, the laws and the scrutiny, and at first it was well received, but there are some issues that we're just not allowed to talk about as cops. And so when I started delving into mental health, when I had Eric Dim come on the show and talk about how he became the most complained cop and how he was forced out of his career by partaking in the core mission of the NYPD, I started to notice a change, not in the rank and file, because we have heavy support from the rank and file,
Yeah.
heavy, but from
Yeah,
the
totally.
administration itself, the politically appointed administration of the NYPD, really, we became the black sheeps of the NYPD, really, for just exploring our thoughts and giving opinion.
Wow. And so much that it got so popular. I do know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, something along the lines where a lot of your colleagues and subordinates, officers, sergeants, were listening a lot to your message, your episodes, to the point where wasn't there a gag order or something along those lines?
Just put it this way, till today, the TVs are constantly searching the prisons to make sure they're not looking at our YouTube channel. My social media, Eric's social media, the podcast social media is scrubbed daily to identify active members of the service who are either liking our posts. It's all under the guise of we don't want people doing things on duty that they're not supposed to. And I understand that, but that's not what it really is. What it
Right.
really is to deter people from talking to myself or Eric. And it's really wild, man. IA had an investigation where they brought down hundreds of NYPD officers. So you could imagine the amount of manpower, time, and money they spent.
Yeah.
And And the main question that kept coming up, and people were calling me that I don't even know. People were sending me that I don't even know. So I know it was legit because I had it a few hundred times that they got called in and there was pictures of my Instagram and my Twitter. And they said, do you know John Macari? Has he ever offered to buy information from you? So, which is insane because I've never posted anything that I think anyone would consider confidential information.
Yeah,
Either has Eric, nor have we talked about anything other than rumors that we're hearing.
of course.
And none of it's confidential stuff. The majority, if you look at my social media or you look at the podcast, everything we do is we follow the news cycle.
Of
An
course.
article comes out, we
Yeah.
tweet our opinion about it, and we talk about it on the podcast.
Yep.
So it's insane to me that how much we've been scrutinized for giving our opinion on topics. And that's really all we've been doing. And I was like, well, I can't even fathom for the life of me how trying to help an organization and trying to help a profession puts you at odds with that same administration.
Totally.
It's wild, man. It's been a hell of a ride, I'll tell you that. Very interesting.
Yes, totally. And I appreciate you sharing that. Hey, listen, let me ask you this. Let's get to the next segment. Worst incident in your career
Oh, man.
that you can think of? I know there's plenty.
I had a lot of bad incidents, but I'll tell you one that sits with me all the time. And it just bothers me. We had a job in the precinct where I was a sergeant, and this man came from overseas, and his brother brought him in, and he left his brother at home with his wife and his children, numerous children, varying ages from a baby to about 11. And the man came home from work, and his brother massacred his entire family. Wow. So terrible job. Cops were in shock. For me, I've been on a lot of jobs like that are like terrible movies that are like I'm like, you can't make a movie that's this graphic and this terrible. I've been on a lot of them, unfortunately, in my career, but they never really affected me. It was always kind of like being in a movie and playing a role in a movie. Horrible scene. I saw a lot of the cops really withered right immediately upon that job and leaving that job. But that same week, we had just gotten a new guy in the detective squad. Now, I wasn't a detective squad, but I was a crime sergeant, so I worked heavily with identifying patterns and things of that nature. So that job happens. Night after that, I meet the new guy. I have a really candid conversation with him at the desk as I'm signing out. It's about 2:30 in the morning. He's telling me about his wife. He's telling me about his kids. He's telling me about all this stuff. And I really liked him. And I really hit it off with him. And I was like, wow. And he walked away. And I said to the lieutenant at the desk, I said, I like that guy. He's going to do good here. He's a good fit, I said that he's a good dude. He's a solid dude. And I walked out. I went home. And the next day I came into work, and I always would go into work an hour or two early. I'd work out and I'd read all of the complaints from the night prior for my precinct and the surrounding precincts, so I could familiarize whatever crimes are happening to add on to the knowledge that I already have to make sure that we are scouring the right locations at the right times and seeing if I could identify anything right off the bat. So when I was walking in, one of the older detectives walked up to me. He's like, hey, Sarge, did you see the new guy? I'm like, nah. He's like, this guy's got an arrest. He just walked away. I don't know where the hell he is. And I'm like, yeah. So I go downstairs, I work out, I get to 61, I turn my guys out, we go out on the street. I get out of the precinct, we go out, we're in the unmarked car, and this is right after Lou and Ramos got assassinated on the streets of Brooklyn. Now I'm in Brooklyn. My brother-in-law was actually a sergeant on that job as well. So there were high tensions going on in the NYPD in New York City at that point related to cops being assassinated. And we get down the block, and all I hear is 1013, 1013, 1013, the address of the precinct. 1013 for us means officer down. So it's the highest call you could have in the PD. So I hear 1013, 1013, and I yell at my driver, get back there right now. Because in my head, I'm like, oh my God, they're shooting the precinct up. Oh my God. And we're racing back. And before we even get there, I see the detective. I see a detective, a female detective with a radio in her hand, and she's like, she's just standing there, no gun out, and she's looking at a car.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, holy shit. And I instantly know what happened. And I'm like, it just flashes in my head, everything. The incident, the encounter I had with the older detective earlier in the day just flashed into my head. And I see the detective staring at a vehicle with her radio in her hand, no gun out. I'm positive I knew her voice, so I know she was the one that called there 1013. So I immediately came over the radio and I yelled, no further, no further, no further. Just send me an ambulance, send me an ambulance. Before I even got up to the car.
Right.
When I got up to the car, I saw that young detective who had just got assigned there he had taken his own life.
Mm.
And then obviously major media was on the scene. Chief of department was there. I believe the police commissioner, I think even the mayor at the time showed up. Everybody was there. All the guys that had been on that earlier job the week earlier, they were kind of friendly with him. They were rookies together. So they had responded too. When they heard the 1013, obviously, like I said, it's a high time.
Totally.
So I tried to get all of them out of there, but they knew the guy. And, streets in New York, the radio's jumping, man. It's boom, 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 boom.
Yeah,
and we're so understaffed that it's constant pressure. And, I've put in the pressure on my guys every night.
Yeah.
Every night I keep the pressure on them. That was my job, right?
Yes.
And my commanding officer comes over to me. Now, we're not holding any other jobs, and I have a couple of cars on the street, and I'm still monitoring the radio, making sure all the jobs are pulled over. But there's a couple of guys I just don't feel right sending them back out. And I'm like, do me a favor, stand over there, stay over there, guard the crime scene. And I keep them there because I'm worried about them. And he says to me, the commanding officer comes over to me and he says, we need these guys out there. And I just look at him and I tell him, I'm like, boss, these guys were all at the job the other night. Look at them. Look at them. Take a good look at them. They look like they're mentally capable of going back out and answering the jobs. I said, we'll do our job. We're going to respond to all the 911 calls, but back off. Back off. I got guys out there that aren't here right now. These two guys, they're staying in here. They're going downstairs the rest of the night. And he looked at me and he goes, that's why you're my rock. And I was like, and I was mad. I was mad at him that night. But I was him so many times.
Yeah.
I was him so many times, dude. I didn't understand what was going on, but that's, I think that was one of the worst nights of my career because I really realized how much pressure is on us, how much pressure to perform is on us. And dude, we were back out the next night and we were back out the night after that.
Yeah.
And we actually had a guy that said that he wanted to eat his own gun. And let me tell you, he walked in the precinct 3 days after that. He was friendly with that detective. He walked back into the precinct 3 days after that. And I said, what are you doing here? And he goes, they put me back. I was like, no. You're not going nowhere. Because in my head, I think he's going down to the locker to clip a lock and take his own life.
Correct.
Right? It's like, you're not going anywhere. Stay right here. And we almost go at it. And I had to call the medical division. They're like, he's back at work. I'm like, how is this guy back at work? Yeah. How is he does not have a week off? Yeah. How does he not give this guy a week off? How doesn't he have a mental evaluation? So much pressure to get back out there.
Yeah.
And, thank God he's still with us today. He had to fight his own demons, though, because we didn't help him.
Yeah, you know what? About the only thing that I can add to all that is we do it to ourselves. It's how we treat each other is what comes to mind in hearing your story. Watching a suicide is just something that it just resonates, and there's nothing, nobody wins. There's nothing good out of that. You kind of feel guilty because there's things that you want to say or do, right? Hey, had I would have been there for him, and I got to tell you, man, in my 24 years in LAPD, I went to maybe 2 funerals. There must have been close to 10 or more, and it was never my thing to go because it's just devastating to see the darkness of how that day is so real, right? Because you just never think you would experience something like that. I mean, let's face it. There's other professions, they don't go through stuff like this. You don't work at IBM and see someone take their life, who's working with you, or whatever other major corporation. So I thank you for that. And anything you'd like to add to any type of, because that is mental wellness. It's this happened. How long ago did this happen? That must have happened, what, 8, 10 years ago?
Yeah, it was over 10 years
Yeah,
ago.
it was over
Yeah.
10 years ago, and mental wellness is not what it is today. And so today, hopefully we've gotten better with that. But it goes to your point about the expectations, and we're just under so much scrutiny that I just pray to God that nothing like that happens from this point forward.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, just to kind of piggyback on what you were saying, man, the guy was at the height of his career, one of the most
Yeah.
happy times in his career. He just had gotten sent to a detective squad after doing years of anti-crime work out on the streets of Brooklyn. And, he had 2 daughters. And, it just shows, the internal pressures of the job really outweigh the good times, So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just something that always sits with me, man.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have 10 more of those stories.
Yeah,
So
no, me and you both, brother. I'm with you on that. Hey, listen, give me something good, man. Give me best reward, achievement, something you're very proud of in your career in NYPD.
oh man, I love being on the street. I made so many great pattern closing arrests. And what patterns are is, multiple crimes, whatever they may be. Whether it be burglary, car break-ins, robberies, you name it. And yeah, nothing felt better to me though than returning people or returning property.
Oh,
Nothing
yeah.
ever felt better to me than that. One of the most pivotal moments in my career, and I've received congressional awards, I've received
Uh,
state assembly, city council, I've received the Chamber of Commerce, I was consistently put up for Cop of the Month, I was consistently put up for Cop of the Year. But one of my favorite achievements ever was New Year's Eve. I'm a sergeant. There's a million people in Times Square. I'm on 42nd and 8th Avenue. And this father comes up to me in a complete panic. He's like, I just lost my son. He's nonverbal and he's autistic. He goes, I don't know where he is. And I was like, he goes, I've been trying to ask cops and they keep brushing me off. So I'm like instantly infuriated because
yeah.
I'm at my supervisor brain is I want to know who those cops are and I
Yeah.
want to talk to them right now. But my other part of my brain is the officer brain, and I'm like, we have a nonverbal autistic
Yeah.
kid
We got to solve
in the
this.
middle of Times Square with a million people, and it's freezing out. He's going to die tonight if we don't get him. And I'm like, take me where it is. Take me where he is. I instantly put it over the radio, a description. Take me where you last saw him. And I grab him in the street, and we break the crowds, and we're literally walking through traffic. And thank God, his son was standing right where he left him.
Oh,
And I never experienced joy like that. Like I was like, the guy was hugging and kissing me, he's like, I've been to
yeah.
jail, man. I love you.
Yeah.
And that was true joy. So, I mean, that was a great moment.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. Awesome to hear, man. So, JD, man, talk to me. What do we got? Let's talk about this podcast, the Finest Unfiltered podcast. Tell me all about it. And how
Yeah,
can we
New
find
York
you?
Finest Retired and Unfiltered podcast, baby. We call it the Finest Unfiltered for short. At the Finest Unfiltered, YouTube, Rumble, everywhere. Apple, Spotify, we're everywhere. It started off where I was just interviewing retired members of the service, just getting their stories to try to humanize police officers. Then I had Eric Dim come on. He explained his story. Me and Eric go back a long time. Really had what I thought was really a good connection and a good flow with each other, and he was like, hey, I'd love to do this again. And I was like, hey, why don't we do like a different version of it where we break down incidents or whatever.
Yeah.
So we teamed up and it's really been moving. The needle's been up, man. We just been doing this slow and steady, with the tortoise. But we've seen a lot of change both in the NYPD, in the conversation around policing, and even in the politics around policing in New York City. So, like I said, we've been in major media for like a little small independent podcast. I mean, and the downloads just keep growing. It's something that I never thought. I thought it would be pretty popular with the rank and file, but I didn't think how popular it would be outside of law enforcement.
Right.
And it's become very, very popular throughout the entire conversation when it relates to New York City, like the political structure. And it's really been just a true blessing, connecting with people like yourself. And actually, it's been really great as far as talking out as well. I think it really is great for mental health. It's a great exercise, and it's a great way for people to come on podcasts like this and myself and really memorialize their career and give a chance to go over their opinions. And that's what we've been doing. We don't sit there and say, oh, we're right and this is what it is.
Yeah.
We sit there, this is my opinion, this is Eric's opinion.
Yeah.
We disagree on topics, and we just kick it around like it's the locker room or we're in a car together. And it's been great, man.
That's right. Shop talk. I truly appreciate that, man. So I'll definitely have all your information on the episode itself. Look, man. Well, we're at the end of the episode, brother. Look, I'm going to leave the floor up to you. Any advice that you have for anyone who's trying to come on the job to be a police officer, young police officer, or anyone who's watching and listening that is in law enforcement? What kind of advice you have, man?
I would say really talk to the people that are on the job that you're looking to go, whether it's LAPD, NYPD, whatever it is. If you do want a career in law enforcement, I got to say you really have to vet these departments well. The major departments, obviously, you will be more lauded if you go there to get the training. But right now, my nephew just called me telling me he signed up for the NYPD test. And I just said, listen, I can't recommend it for you right now. I can't. Take the other tests, take the sanitation, take fire department, look for law enforcement in Long Island and Nassau and Suffolk. Yeah. I'm like, it's just the amount of scrutiny that these guys are under. And, I talk to young guys every day that are leaving, and I tell everybody it's the greatest job in the world. I would not do anything differently. I would go back and do it again, and I would do it just the way I did it. Yeah. It was a great time, but that time has came and went, and I'm seeing young guys leave to go to sanitation department. I'm seeing young guys leave to go work menial jobs and leave these careers. And it's scary, man. It's scary what's happening in law enforcement. So if you're going to take a career in law enforcement, my advice is totally vet the department. Make sure it's something that because it's a hard job. It's a very hard job, but make sure internally that it's not an impossible job.
Yeah, totally. Brother, JD, man, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It goes without saying, I owe you a visit to sunny Florida. That's where we're at, right?
I'm in Florida, but I'm often in the city too.
Yeah,
so I'll be
back.
But
you're a Yankee at heart. I know you're a Yankee at heart.
Yeah,
you got
I still own a home in New York City, so I still go back and forth a lot. But right now I'm in Florida.
Yeah, better Yankee than a Marlin for sure. Would that be fair to say?
Definitely. I appreciate you having me on, brother. It was a pleasure. Great talk. I love the podcast, dude. It's doing awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon, man. All right.
Well,
we're clear. And like always, please be safe out there. And don't forget to go Code 6. Thank you.